Hey, welcome to the show. It's Move or Improve with Debbie, and thanks for joining me. I'm talking today about an interesting concept. We hear so much about climate change and all the things that should be done to protect our planet. And I started thinking from a housing perspective, what are some of the implications of climate change on housing? And so I'm doing my podcast today on that topic, and I think it's an interesting one, and I hope you enjoy it. So, as you know, I've been selling real estate since the 1990s, and I've seen the evolution of home interiors. The first house that I owned was built in the early 1900s and included a parlor back in the old days. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, homes had rooms built for a purpose. Servants were relegated to their quarters while the owners lived in other areas of the house. Lower and middle class families kind of made do with fewer rooms, and they had a kitchen space and a sleeping space, but all of them were multi-purpose. As construction techniques improved over time, the number of rooms in houses increased too. Indoor plumbing and electricity became more available, and rooms remained rooms to provide privacy. Homes were smaller in earlier days, and the average number of people in the American household was 5 people in 1880, and then it dropped to 4.3 in 1920. Today, there's an average of 2.5 people in a household. I wouldn't want to be the half person, but hey. The first door or wall to be omitted was often the one between the living room and dining room areas because those are public spaces. But work areas like the kitchen or the bedrooms or the bathrooms obviously were closed off so people wouldn't see the mess of a meal being made, for example, or your bed not made. And elite owners had servants to cook and clean up, and they certainly didn't want them to be noticed by your guests, heaven forbid. But smaller houses in the 1930s through 1950 relied on interior walls to provide privacy, security, isolation, and control over the environment. These homes were built after World War II and the Depression because people were nervous about the Cold War and nuclear bombs. Eventually, starting in the 1950s and beyond, an overall trend towards contemporary interiors became the norm, and the 1970s really saw the open concept increase in popularity. Now, when I started real estate in the mid-90s, the open floor plan concept was becoming more of a standard. Structural support had to be improved and redistributed to other walls. Because of the improvements in construction methods, the ranch and split level of the 40s changed the way Americans lived. Instead of a two-story Cape Cod or colonial, one-story ranch-style homes opened up floor plans to accommodate continuous space. But the kitchen didn't change until much later. Kitchens were areas of work. Servants were not seen by guests or family members. Many kitchens were designed to have a back door so that they could dispose of garbage faster and allow for fresh air and allow for deliveries to be made. But with the advent of air conditioning and refrigeration, the kitchen became part of the open concept of a floor plan. In today's market, though, we will need to consume a lot less energy to curb the onset of climate change. Closed floor plans do save energy. Two-story foyer entrances that produce hot air that requires more air conditioning to cool are actually being converted to second-floor landing areas or separate rooms entirely. Designing homes around entertaining that only happens at certain times of the year is popular, but it's very wasteful. And a closed-off kitchen is more efficient for cooking than the open style so common today. Instead of moving the sink closer to the stove, builders included a pot filler or a second sink in the center island, and cooking odors waft their way through the house. Today's interiors include vast amounts of square footage in one single continuous space. So having friends over in a high-ceiling family room off the kitchen while the game is on and pots and pans are banging and food aromas drift throughout the house while children loudly play can be a daunting, entertaining experience. Here's some things to consider, though. First of all, parents do like to keep an eye on the children while they prepare a meal, even though it may be noisy. Second, the open floor plan does provide a lot of natural light. Big windows can give a kind of a sunroom feeling to the interior. Third thing to think about is, do you like having the kitchen open to the family room? If you have a sink in the island, You have to make sure your dishes are cleaned up so your guests won't be subjected to the mess of pots and pans. If you can do the dishes before company gets there, well, that's great. But if you can't, your guests are going to be exposed to all the dirty dishes, pots, and pans that might not fit in the dishwasher. Next thing is the island can be a dropping off area, and usually is, for mail, keys, miscellaneous papers, receipts, and more. It's a place to put things you'll deal with later. This may be the case with any room with walls, but it's certainly very noticeable with an open concept kitchen. An open staircase above, looking down to the floor below, makes it harder to close off sound coming from another floor. If someone is upstairs and wants privacy or quiet, the sound of the TV or music on the main level can be disconcerting, especially if you're trying to get the kids to bed or the child is taking a nap in the afternoon. The next thing to think about, though, is you'll miss not having a lot of wall space if you have artwork or photos or furniture. Lack of extra walls in the kitchen will cut back on your storage space. Arranging furniture becomes much more of a challenge. Builders are designing in larger homes something called a mess kitchen, M-E-S-S. This is a kitchen behind a nice kitchen. It sounds absurd, but the mess kitchen is where the food is prepared. Dishes can be left unwashed, and that sort of thing. The Schumacher Homes messy kitchen opts for a more extreme approach. The builder hides one kitchen behind another. The design will look familiar at first because it's an open kitchen with an island that faces a large vaulted great room, has a second floor gallery, and flanks an open plan dining room. But this part of the kitchen is markedly smaller than the average in a home of its size, about 3,700 square feet or so. The public kitchen boasts a range top, an oven, and a microwave and a sink, but the rest of the kitchen is missing. A Schumacher Homes model boasts that the main kitchen and a messy kitchen behind it is essentially a large pantry with a refrigerator, countertop, sink, and dishwasher. It is housed in a separate room behind the public kitchen. There, the refrigerator, the pantry storage, the cabinets, and another sink and dishwasher are situated with long countertop extending the length of the space. The idea is that pre-meal food prep and post-meal food waste can be stowed out of sight in the messy kitchen, and that leaves the public kitchen for the cooking, eating, and visiting. Just remember, too, that with an open floor plan, it really won't matter where you are, living room, dining room, kitchen. Everyone will know what everyone else is doing. Privacy is a rare commodity. Perhaps that's why there's been an increase in man caves and she sheds. I don't know. Some of the popularity of the open concept, though, is caused by successful marketing to inexperienced buyers and fearful sellers. The marketing suggests to buyers that if you don't have an open floor plan, you won't be able to spend time with your children or have friends and family visit, or you won't look successful, or you might seem poor and old. Well, I really would love to talk to younger buyers who bought the open floor plan and have lived in it for a while to see how they like it now. It may be a very different situation. Although some people consider cooking to be a spectator sport, many prefer to prepare the meal out of the view of the guests. They don't want people around. And food odors wafting through the air and grease from fried foods, if you eat that stuff, landing on upholstered furniture may not appeal to you either. Open concept kitchens often require the cook to take extra steps to get something from the refrigerator to the prep area and then onto the stove. And large open spaces can be cavernous and cold. It's the opposite of cozy. And as I said, if you have an art collection, there may not be enough wall space to hang it. If you like books, then you'll have to be creative with bookcase placement. Large open spaces are more costly to heat and cool, especially with cathedral or two-story ceilings. In other words, you're heating and cooling one huge space rather than smaller spaces, and that's certainly not as energy efficient. With open concept plans, there need to be really smaller nooks or dedicated spaces for hobbies or crafts or woodworking or reading. Open floor plans don't accommodate colonial, Victorian, or Georgian style furniture. A more contemporary style of furniture is required to accent the contemporary lines. In open space, believe it or not, it's harder to keep clean. Toys seem to multiply to fill available space, and pet hair goes everywhere. Making a small space feel larger, though, in small homes is a good solution to a cramped feeling, and an open floor plan may work for you. It's probably the biggest challenge that open concept living solves. Small spaces can feel so much smaller when they're cut up by walls that delineate one living space from another. Adding more square footage comes at a cost, and it's not always an option. If you're in a condo that can't be expanded, or adding on a room is cost prohibitive to your house, open concept can be the way to go. A not so tricky way to trick the eye into thinking that you've got more square footage than you really do is to tear down some walls and open up your rooms to each other. And think about the aging in place idea. If you want to stay in your home and you live in an older home, opening up those walls will help you navigate easier through the house. Narrow hallways can be removed and narrow doorways can be widened, making it easier for a wheelchair or a walker, or just plain easier to move through. Even strollers and babies need to have more room to crawl. But if there's no walls to block your view, the beauty of your whole home is on full display. Frank Lloyd Wright originally began changing the way our homes were designed to highlight each space and to encourage indoor-outdoor living. And his thoughtful plans allowed a continuity of design and flow from space to space to be the highlight of a home. Today's open floor plans are the beneficiaries of this change in concept and can be stunning visually. Load-bearing walls. When you look at a compartmentalized house and imagine an open flow from space to space, your first thought should be, is that a load-bearing wall? Knocking down one of these key walls can come at a huge cost, and it does require a professional to check things out for you. In many cases, those load-bearing walls can be replaced with beams that displace the weight of your home, but they're not cheap, and the cost can easily run into the thousands. Permits are required, and you'll have to provide drawings showing the details so that the county or the jurisdiction knows that the house is going to stay standing. If it is a large job, then you'll need an engineer or an architect or both. You can't just buy a 4x4 off the shelf and use it as the sole beam to carry the load. One thing to consider is to use what we call a laminated veneer lumber beam. That's LVL beam. They have much greater strength and they're not that expensive. Remember that in most cases, the replacement beam will be lower than the height of the ceiling. So if you want the beam to be flush with the ceiling, you have to cut out the floor joists above and then set the beam into the plane of the floor above. And then you hang the joist ends using metal joist hangers. And if you just have an attic above, that might not be such a bad way to go. But if you have a whole nother bedroom or something like that, it might cause problems. It's a whole lot more work and costs more, of course. And if you do try to get away without using a beam or support of any kind, your house is going to fall down slowly. Just watch that curved ceiling. So how do you decide what's right for you? Well, carefully consider why you want an open concept home before beyond the current fascination of the style. Yeah, everybody has it, and that's what builders are building. But if you really are entertainers and not just holiday-only hosts, that could be for you. If your family craves togetherness now and as it grows at the expense of privacy, maybe you want an open concept. If you love indoor-outdoor living and want to enhance that, open concept may be the way to go. If your open kitchen shelving is full of perfectly coordinated plates and glasses and you think you can extend that to the rest of your home, this could be the best bet. But either way, take all these factors into consideration and choose a home layout that's